What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with maybe, we'll see how it goes, the last episode in the What It's Like to Be Homeless series. I've had quite a few people asking me to make this content. I apologize for taking so long. I don't know why. Honestly, I lost interest in this part of the story. It's actually incredibly interesting. I don't know. I kind of got lost from making these videos. So today I'm going to try to take you maybe through the end of it. So where I last left you, again, it's hard to narrow down exact time frames during this period of time for reasons you're about to understand, but it was moving into the springtime. So I was talking about the fact that, the bugs were coming out, the birds, it had been relatively quiet in camp, for lack of a better term, throughout the winter. And then when temperatures started warming up, everything started to change, and one of the things that I mentioned was a harrowing rainstorm. So as luck would have it, in spring in Texas, it can be 60, 70 degrees one day and 40 degrees the next. This happens not infrequently, and there was a particular night where I had, it's starting to get lighter later as well. So, through the winter, I would often try to get to camp before, not necessarily before dark, but, around dark. Sometimes I'd be on the bus till 10:30, give or take. I could never be on the bus, I think, past 10:30 if I was going to make it back to camp. I told you in one of the earlier videos that I had a bus station that I could go to that ran real late at night. But the last bus that would hit the corner near my campsite, I think, stopped running at like 10:30 on the weekdays. I can't remember what it was like on the weekends. So give or take, it just depended on what my day was like. Sometimes I would be, I guess for most of the winter it was still after dark before I would get to camp. So with the extended light period and the better weather, and maybe I was just getting comfortable in my new environment at this point. I was staying away from camp longer, and I used to, at this point, I was spending a lot of time in the little computer room that was in my brother's apartment. So if you remember from previous videos, my campsite was very near my brother's apartment complex, and I had the code to get into this little room where they had two computers that were permanently connected to the internet. I was almost always the only person in there. And so sometimes I would go in there and be in there for hours just messing around the internet. Well, one particular night, I got caught out on the bus system, running around, panhandling, trying to, get my daily, food and gear and supplies and shit. And it's a rainstorm came. And so I come back, I get off the bus, and I walk down to where my tent area is, and it's pouring rain, and I'm trying to avoid, getting unnecessarily wet. And I thought, well, maybe it'll blow over. So instead of trying to get to my tent, I went into this little computer room, and I hung out for a while, and it was not blowing over. It kept raining and raining and raining, which probably proved to be a massive mistake. So I kind of, got bored, or, was hungry or whatever, just needed to get back to my campsite. So I ventured out from the little computer room, to where I would typically cross the river, which was really just like a little stream. 90% of the time, it was just this tiny little stream that you could just easily one hop over. And lo and behold, when this rainstorm came, I massively underestimated how much that little stream would swell. And so I go walking over to this little thing that used to be just a trickle, and now it's a raging, it's not a river, I mean, whatever you call it, stream. It's now at least 3.5 feet wide of very raging water. It was, like I told you, there was a significant incline on this ground here, this river cut through, and it was roaring. And so I'm like, fuck, what am I gonna do? I've got this big, heavy backpack with all of my stuff on it, and I'm eyeballing this thing, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And so I did what was infinitely worse and decided, well, I'm scared, like I don't know what to do. I went back to the computer room for God knows how long. Well, that didn't make anything better because the rain didn't stop, and so the river's probably only getting worse and worse as time goes on. So finally I realized dude, there's nothing I could do. Even if the rain stops now, there's no reason to believe the river is going to shrink in any appreciable way anytime soon. It was getting later into the evening, and it was cold outside. That was the problem. The rainstorm seemed to have come with a front or something, and I don't know the exact temperature, but, you know, because when you're wet, any cold sucks even worse. I'm guessing it was in the 50s. Could have been less, could have been more. I don't know. It was cold. And so I go out in all of my, you know, Gore-Tex rain gear, and I've got my backpack. And finally I decide, you know, fuck it, it's go time. Like there's nothing I can do. I have to make this attempt. So I feel like the chances of me clearing this river with this massive backpack on are even more slim. So, I mean, you know, what are you gonna do? I did the only thing I could do. I took my backpack that's got a substantial amount of my very necessary gear and clothes and shit in it, and I got next to the river and I just fucking heaved it. This gives you an idea of the size of this river. I don't know how wide it was at this point, but I heaved this backpack and it clears the river, but there's like an embankment, and so it hits and it starts to roll, and I can feel my heart just about jump out of my chest as this bag starts to roll toward this river. Thank God, whoever you believe in, it stopped. It came to a rest right on the edge of the river that's running by. And so it's like, okay, you know, part one, we're safe. We haven't lost our gear. Now I've just got to get across this goddamn river. So, like, dude, again, like I'm a tweaker. Like there's no telling what I weighed. It was probably sub 130 pounds, 130 pounds. I'm like 5'9", 5'10". I'm 5'10" now. I'm guessing I was about that then. So, you know, I try to get back a ways to run and jump this river. The grass is soaking wet. It's muddy. You're not going to get any good purchase on the ground when you jump, but it is what it is. So I run and I jump. And I get sort of across, I guess, across the river. Like, I don't remember my foot landing in the water, but I just remember like laying out on the ground, like, you know, like face down, and my legs getting into the water. So I don't know if I stepped in the water, if they slipped in the water. I just know that I was laying face down, and my legs are now like from the knee or maybe a little above the knee are in the water, and it's starting to pull me into the water. So I grab onto ground or grass or whatever, you know, this is not like cliffhanger, okay? Don't let me, you know, mislead you. The river was enough that I was able to clear, I think, without putting my foot into the water, but I slipped and fell and my legs are in the water. And it's cold as shit and it's pulling on me, so I grab something and I get myself up onto completely dry ground and get my pack, but now my legs are soaking wet. So I don't remember all of the clothing that I had at this time. I cannot. There's weird like bits and pieces of this experience. Like I don't remember where I was doing laundry. I assume I was doing laundry. Maybe my brothers had like maybe I was doing it at his apartment. I don't really have good memory of laundry day. I know I was going to the golf course, like I said in previous videos, to shower. Sometimes I would shower at his apartment, rarely. But nevertheless, so I clear this river, you know, heart's beating out of my chest, and I get my bag and everything, and I make it to my tent. And I get into my tent, I'm freezing to death. Like, I'm so cold. Again, I have no idea what the temperature is. I can tell you that my wife and I recently, when we had our RV, we were in Falcon Lake State Park one time, and it was 56 degrees outside, and we were in our trailer thinking that we were gonna die. Like, we are not equipped for cold weather. So it could have been 60 and wet, and I would have told you I was freezing to death. My wife and I have occasionally in the spring decided to go to Gloria's. There's a Gloria's, what is it, Brazilian? El Salvador, you get a Gloria's restaurant. They have one at the harbor, which is right on the lake that we live on. And if we go up there at night and it's like 4 degrees and windy at night, we're freezing to death. Multiple times she's worn like a sexy dress, and we've tried to go to dinner in the 60s at night, and we're dying. So again, it could have easily been 50, 55 degrees. I don't know. I'm soaking wet. I'm freezing my ass off. I get into my tent, And again, all I can remember is putting on as many layers as I could get on my upper body. And I dry my legs off. My legs are freezing cold. And I remember that I had like a sweater that I put my feet into the sweater, and like my feet down the arms of the sweater. I didn't have enough layers to put on my lower body. And so I put my legs into the sweater arms and pulled that on me, and then got dry enough and got in my got in my sleeping bag to try to warm up. Again, I don't remember all the numbers. I don't know the numbers, but it was a very, very cold night. And the other thing, I can't remember if I mentioned this in one of the previous videos. Rainstorms in a little 8x8 tent or 4x4, I can't remember what it was, probably 8x8. Dude, that's not a cool experience. Like when the lightning is crashing and the wind's blowing your tent, it's pissing rain on you, and like I'm in the middle of a bunch of trees, and so I would routinely be laying in there weathering out a storm, and you're just sort of laying there praying to God that a lightning bolt doesn't strike a tree, or or the wind or something doesn't drop a part of a tree on you and kill you or impale you. Like I can remember laying in that tent thinking like, I'm like, my brain is like my own worst enemy. And I'll just fantasize all these horrific things happening. And I can remember laying in that tent during storms, just like imagining what it would be like if like a big branch or something fell out of the tree and like pinned me down and like a limb like pierced through me somewhere. And so like I'm laying on the ground alive, mortally wounded and bleeding out. Like, dude, can you imagine? You're in the middle of the woods, like 2 minutes from an entire apartment complex of people, and I probably would have laid there and bled out because there'd be nothing I could do about it. I'd be this close to help, but have nobody's gonna hear me screaming. Like the odds of somebody hearing me screaming and finding me and saving me are about nil. So it always felt like I was just rolling the dice with my life every time there was a rainstorm. Obviously, what is the statistical probability, that something's gonna happen? Probably small, but when you're in it, it's all you can think about. Like you're trapped in a tent in pouring rain. All you have are your thoughts. And in my case, all they are is negative. I'm just coming up with all the possible ways that this can end in a horrific, terrible nightmare. So, good news is, no horrific, terrible nightmare befell me. And I lived to see morning and went about my life, I guess. And so, it's back to the day-to-day grind, and coping with, again, the bugs, the temperature, and the weather. But this is probably like April. I'm guessing this is probably April-ish, around the time that I'm talking to you about. And so as summer starts to take hold and temperatures start to get up, things start to become more and more uncomfortable. It's like, it's one thing, like 80s during the day, that's pretty cool, it was a lot better than being cold. So I'm enjoying the days during the spring. That's a welcome change. And with my sleeping bag at night, it's still better. Like, even if it's getting to the 60s, whatever it's getting to at night, this is still the best conditions that I've had. So the springtime in the tent was a lot of fun. I'm working on my shelter. I think I had dug a second latrine. I can't recall. I'm beefing up my fortifications. I'm feeling a lot better during the day because it's nice outside. So like my attitude's better. I'm panhandling more money. Things are going, as good as can be expected. And I remember at some point just thinking, man, dude, I could do this forever. There were periods of time during that first spring where life was great. Like I was always fed. I was regularly eating Chinese food buffet for lunch. I'm hanging out at libraries. I'm buying books. I'm running around all over downtown, going to anything free you can get into. I can't remember if I mentioned this in one of the videos before. One time while I was homeless, I panhandled enough money to go to, I think it was the Dallas World Aquarium. I would just do cool shit during the day. I would go to a museum or to an aquarium or find some place where there was free artwork to check out or go to a park. Because again, the city's coming alive again. It's nice outside. You know, you just feel good in the spring. Yeah, at least I do. I hate winter. And so I was having a tremendous amount of fun. And I remember walking, you know, like I said, the bus was like about 3/4 of a mile from my tent. And I remember one night walking from the bus, heading back to camp and thinking, dude, if it wasn't so lonely, like if I could just find a girl to be homeless with, I would never get a job again. Like there'd be no reason to. I had everything that I needed at that time. Like at that point in my life, I couldn't even fathom ever making the kind of money that I make right now. Having a wife and 2 brand new BMW, like all of the things, all of the luxuries that I ended up having in life. At that point, when you're living in an 8x8 tent, dude, the life that I live is about as far away from me at that point as, like, you know, being a billionaire is for me now. Like I can't even fathom being a millionaire or a billionaire. But I have a very comfortable living. When I was in the tent, like $50,000 a year was just like, that's rich people. Like there's no way I'm ever gonna make that much money. So I had learned to be very happy with almost nothing. If my stomach was full, if I had candy to eat, if I had cigarettes to smoke and a good book to read, man, that was all I needed in life. And I never had to worry about anything. I had no responsibilities, no job, no schedule. I could go to bed when I wanted to. I could wake up when I wanted to. The only thing that ever controlled me in any way was my willingness to walk somewhere or the bus schedule. You know, like there was a limit to how far I could travel, and because I had built a home for myself, I never got too far away from camp because I always wanted to return there. If I ever became homeless again, I would straight up be a nomad. I would get all of the things that I needed to live into a backpack, and I would carry that from town to town, city to city, state to state. I would just stay on the move. I would not go back to doing what I did, just living in one tiny little area of Dallas. There's an entire country to be seen. And there's times, honestly, like even, especially recently when I've been back to work, that I was just fantasizing about getting fired and losing everything. I can remember sitting at my desk one day during this training that I just had to go through, thinking, I just want to snap and get these people to fire me. I don't care if I lose my cars, my house. If it wasn't for my kids, I probably would do it. If not for my kids, my wife and I would just hit the fucking road. Because there's so much there's so much life that you can actually live when you're not being constrained by a 9 to 5. Like when you don't have, it's like in Fight Club, the things that you own end up owning you. There has never been a more true statement made than that. When you have nothing, you are free to do anything. That's also a statement in Fight Club. I think he says it's only something like that. It's only when you lose everything that you're free to do anything. And so, you know, when you unshackle yourself from the chains that society puts on you, it is the most remarkable experience you can have in life. But in my case, it was extremely, extremely lonely. And, you know, my brother and all his friends, they all had girls. And that's been my weakness my entire life. Like, I don't need a bunch of men around me. I don't need a large friend group. But I desperately need the love of a woman in my life. And that was the final piece that I could not solve. And I remember, you know, you flash forward a couple of months. I remember, I guess I was still, by this, I think I was still in the tent in July. And so at this point, it's really getting uncomfortable. You know, like the daytime temperatures are really high, but the worst part is when the nighttime lows get above 80, that's when living in the tent actually becomes unbearable. The thing that I learned that first summer is that it's way easier to be homeless in the winter, which is weird because that's when people generally feel the most sorry for homeless people. Generally, when you're driving around and you see somebody huddled up and cold, like for me, even now, having been there, that tugs on your heartstrings more. The thought of somebody sleeping outside in the cold typically is a lot harder for other humans to cope with. You don't so much worry about homeless people in the summer. Like, yeah, during the day you might. If you see some homeless guy standing on the side of the highway when it's 105 degrees during the day, you're like, ugh, that really sucks. I'm not thinking about that guy at night. And you should be. if you care about other people's and their suffering, sleeping outside when it's 85 or 90 degrees at night is unbearable. It is miserable. It is one of the worst things you can experience. You cannot get comfortable. I don't give a shit if it's 20 degrees outside. You can put enough clothes on, and with the right sleeping bag, you can be warm enough to get a good night's sleep when it's 20 degrees outside. When it's 90 degrees at night in the summer, you are miserable. There's a limit to how much you can take off. And in the absence of air conditioning, it is excruciating. You can't stay hydrated. It's hotter than hell all day long, and then you're sleeping in buckets of sweat at night. It's like being on a giant trend blast. Like, you just cannot stay hydrated. Being homeless in the summer in Texas is one of the hardest things in the world to do. I will take the winter hands down any day of the week, not even question it. So now it's gone. So the last thing that I remember before things really changed was the 4th of July. My brother had a Tahoe. He had this really nice Tahoe with wheels and a system in it. He was dating this really cute little blonde, like, skater chick. And he asked me if I wanted to go hang out with them on 4th of July and watch fireworks and shit. And it was like, yeah, dude, that'd be great. Like, you know, I don't want to be alone, you know. Dude, I would have rather been alone. Like, I would have much rather been alone in my tent. Because what I ended up doing was sitting in the third row of my brother's Tahoe while he and his girlfriend and his best friend and his girlfriend were all piled in the truck in front of us. And they're all like hugged up and cuddling and smoking joints and making out and watching the fireworks. And dude, when you're like the fifth wheel, holy that was the most excruciating, lonely moment of my life. I remember sitting in the back of that Tahoe and my heart was just absolutely breaking. Because, like, the thing I wanted the most in life, I felt the farthest away from. Like, I had conquered everything there was to conquer. I had conquered hunger. I had conquered homelessness. I had built my own home. I had built my own security system. I had learned to survive with absolutely nothing. I knew I was never gonna starve. I was never gonna go without. I could survive the cold, the rain. I was surviving the heat. Like I had learned to survive. But I was totally and completely alone while doing it. And being in the company of other people who had the thing that I wanted the most in life was absolutely heartbreaking. And that was when, like, that was the breaking point for me. Like, that was the point where I started to realize, dude, I can't do this forever. Like, it wasn't, none of the other things had conquered me, but the loneliness was killing me. And I sat in the back of that fucking car. I think I cried. Like, I think I remember sitting in the back of his Tahoe, like, crying quietly to myself, just broken with loneliness while they're up there cuddling and having their significant others, and it was miserable. And so, you know, they go home and they drop me off. I go back to my tent, and so there had been this period again. There's, you know, throughout this entire experience, there's these highs and lows, you know, and so I was in the middle of one of the highest points of the entire experience, and it was being destroyed by the loneliness. And then right behind it became the heat and all of the uncomfortableness of trying to survive outside in brutal Texas heat. And about this time, this guy that we were friends with, Randy, this guy that I've known for years, he was actually one of my brother's friends, and he and I met, he became friends. He ended up getting an apartment in the same complex that my brother was living in. I don't know why he did this. I can't remember. Maybe he had a roommate in the beginning. All I remember was, you know, I was around my brother's apartment at some point, and Randy approached me. He was like, dude, I've got a 2-bedroom apartment, and like I could use a roommate. Like I could, you know, like why don't you get out of the fucking tent and come live in my apartment? And I was like, for real? And he's like, yeah, dude, like, you know, come on, man, like just get your shit, like, you know, get all your shit, get your bag or whatever and come on. And so I'm like, hell yeah. So I pack up most of my stuff. I actually, at this point, this is kind of tangential, but I had actually gotten a new tent. So I had saved up enough money to buy this giant 3-room tent from Walmart. It had like 2 sleeping quarters that had tunnels that connected to this big like center mesh house. So the idea was that you could camp with your family. So like my wife and I would have one side, the kids could have another, and then you could set up like a dinner table or something in the middle, and it would be covered from mosquitoes. And so I had actually just recently purchased this bigger tent, and I had taken down, I can't remember if I had built it next to the other tent. It's irrelevant. But the significant part is that so when he asked me if I wanted to move into his apartment, I didn't have any furniture or a bed or anything. So I just got my backpack and all my clothes and my sleeping bag, and I brought one of the pieces of this tent, and I built the tent in the floor of my bedroom in this guy's 2-bedroom apartment. So now I'm living in an apartment in a tent in the bedroom. So his friends would come over, which I knew most of them, and they would come over and they're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? You're still living in a tent in an apartment. I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a bed. I've been sleeping on the floor. I mean, I've been sleeping on the ground for like a year, sleeping in buses, sleeping in bathrooms. So I was just in this apartment, sleeping in my sleeping bag, or sometimes like it'd be hot, so like I'd unfold it and just like sleep on it like a blanket. But I would just I just had my tent in the middle of the bedroom floor. So I would just go in my bedroom, close my door, get in my tent, and go to sleep. That's how I did. Like, I don't know. It was cool for me. And so, so at this point, now that like I've kind of climbed off the street and I'm now living in an apartment, now my brother is willing to sort of associate with me again. Now I'm no longer the crazy weird guy who's living in this apartment. And so my brother puts me back to work. So he, this whole time, had been selling speakers. So I think maybe it was Randy, he and Randy were working together. I can't remember, maybe that was the gig. But basically the short side of it is, now that I was living with Randy, my brother finally let me go back to work with his guys and his speaker company. And so I started getting up first thing in the morning, going selling speakers with them during the day. Well, now I go from making, $20, $30 a day panhandling to $200 or $300, sometimes $500 would be my cut of the earnings from selling speakers. So now I'm starting to stack cash up, and because I have to help pay for this apartment. So I've got bills now, but I've also got a job where I'm able to earn some really significant money at this point. And so of course, what do I do? What do I do? The second that I get a couple of bucks in my name, I get in touch with Steve and I start using Speed again. So now I've got enough money to pay for my apartment, to pay for my food, but now I can get back into my habit. And so Steve and I reconnect, because now I'm not this homeless guy who's a burden on him. I've got some money. I can actually buy my own dope, and I start using again in a major way. I'm talking full-blown, complete relapse, except now I'm on the pipe and I have a place to do it and money to really fund as much of a habit as I want. And I went off the deep end again and started staying up for days and weeks on end. And I was picking myself to death. There's actually now going to be an entire other, at least 1 or 2 videos to this series, because something major happened to Steve that changed the entire dynamic between he and I. So I'm gonna cut this video short now, and I'll come back with what's gonna be, I think, part 15 in the What It's Really Like to Be Homeless series and tell you what happened to Steve, which changed everything. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.